Husband found his cheating wife with her ex and took devastating revenge. Meanwhile, I continued packing up my life. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Seeing her with Edward, knowing she had allowed herself to be so careless, had left a deep scar. At her father's urging, she sought comfort from him. When he picked her up from the airport, she broke down, sobbing into his arms. When a devoted husband discovers his wife cheating with her ex, he doesn't just walk away. He takes a devastating yet calculated revenge that leaves her and their family in shambles. Watch this gripping story of betrayal, consequences, and redemption unfold on Reddit cheating stories. Don't miss out on more shocking and emotional tales like this one. Hit subscribe now and join us for more unbelievable stories every week. My dad gave me solid advice when I first started dating. He said, "Men of value don't accept disrespect, manipulation, or lies from women. Stay true to yourself and always be a man of value." I've tried to live by that ever since. So there I was, telling my wife, Abigail, about a sudden change of plans. The merger meeting got moved up, and I have to leave tomorrow morning. I won't be back until late Sunday, I explained. I know how important this wedding is to you, especially since you're the maid of honor. But I just got promoted to CFO. Missing this meeting isn't an option for the company or for our future. I'm really sorry. She didn't take it well. Are you serious? She snapped. We've been planning this for so long, and now you're canceling at the last minute? I'll have to go alone. Do you know how embarrassing that'll be for me? Can't someone else take your place? Abigail, this deal is worth over $2 billion. I'm leading it. We've been working on it for a year, and no one else can step in. A lot of people's jobs depend on this deal going through. I understand why you're upset, but there's nothing I can do. I'll make it up to you with the bonus from the deal. I'll be back Sunday. She was furious. After that, she stopped talking to me entirely and told me to sleep in the guest room. No intimacy, no closeness, nothing. It was unlike her. I knew the wedding was important to her. Margaret, her best friend, had been through so much. Margaret had survived a brutal betrayal. Her ex-husband cheated on her during a severe illness and abandoned her when she needed him most. It devastated her. But after years of battling depression, she found happiness again with Brandon. This wedding was a celebration of her comeback, and Abigail had been by her side through it all. I understood how much it hurt Abigail for me to miss the wedding, but my hands were tied. I figured I'd just have to take the heat and make it up to her when I got back. The next morning, I tried to kiss Abigail goodbye, but the bedroom door was locked. She wouldn't open it. I told her I loved her and promised to call from Italy when I landed. With a heavy heart, I left for the airport. During the flight, I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I left an apology and sent a text before takeoff and another when I landed. No response. Knowing she was upset, I asked our twin daughters, Taylor and Sloan, to check on her. They're daddy's girls, always have been, and I trusted them to look after her. When I arrived in Italy, the unexpected happened. The meeting was canceled. The CEO of the other company had a family emergency. Without hesitation, I booked the next direct flight to Philadelphia. The wedding reception started at 7 p.m., and I figured I could make it by 9. I landed, rented a car, and headed straight to the venue. The party was in full swing when I arrived. Music, laughter, dancing. People were having the time of their lives. I grabbed a double bourbon from the bar and scanned the crowd of over 200 guests, searching for Abigail. As I sipped my drink, memories of our life together washed over me. Abigail, 5 years older than me, had gone through her own heartbreak before we met. Her ex-husband, Dr. Edward Walker, cheated on her during his residency, leaving her emotionally and financially shattered. When I met her, she was working as a waitress, rebuilding her life. Despite everything, she had this spark, this resilience that I couldn't ignore. Over the years, we built a life together, raised our daughters, and created a marriage rooted in trust and loyalty. I thought we were unshakable. That's why it hit me so hard when I spotted Abigail. She was sitting with Edward, her ex-husband. I knew he was friends with Margaret, but I hadn't expected to see him here, especially not without his wife. It caught me completely off guard. Feeling drained from all the travel, I stayed back for a moment, observing them. They seemed far too friendly given their history. Before I could decide whether to approach, Abigail stood up, took his hand, and led him to the dance floor. She looked stunning in her elegant dress, and for a brief second, I hoped it was just an innocent dance. But as they swayed through several slow songs, I began to feel a gnawing unease. Abigail had been drinking, and I could tell from her overly flirty behavior. Normally, a few drinks made her more affectionate and playful with me. But this was different. Then it happened, the moment that shattered me. She kissed him, right there in the middle of the dance floor in front of everyone. I froze, humiliated and furious, as they shared intimate touches and exchanged more kisses. Watching Edward's hands roam freely while Abigail did nothing to stop him left me in utter disbelief. Just as I was about to step in and put an end to it, they returned to their table. But instead of stopping, they leaned into each other, kissing like they were newlyweds. His hands were on her chest, and her hand was under the table. That was when it hit me. My marriage was over. I remembered my dad's words. Respect yourself, son. Don't put up with being treated badly. It was all the clarity I needed. Sure, I could have stormed over, caused a scene, ruined the wedding, and made sure everyone knew what was happening. But instead, I decided to handle it differently. If she wanted him, she could have him. She wasn't mine anymore. Calmly, I took out my phone, zoomed in, and snapped a series of close-up photos and a short video. Then I sent her a text. Guess what, sweetheart? My meeting got pushed, and I'm back early. Seems like you're in good hands tonight. I'll head back home, assuming you'll be spending the night with Dr. Edward Walker. Now I get why you've been ignoring my calls and texts. Have a blast, and cheers to our marriage ending. I'll be gone by the time you come back tomorrow. I pressed send and watched from a distance, curious to see her reaction. It didn't take long. Her phone lit up, and she looked down, reading the message. The shift in her demeanor was immediate. She sobered up fast, her expression turning serious. I waited just long enough to confirm she'd seen it, then left the party. As I reached my car, I heard her yelling, "Michael, please wait." I turned back briefly, met her pleading eyes with a cold stare, shook my head, and got in the car. Before she could reach me, I drove off. My phone started blowing up with calls, but I ignored every single one. If she wanted to run back to her ex, that was fine by me. After what I'd just seen, we were done. It had been over 2 decades since she left him, and now, given the first opportunity, she was right back in his arms. She'd have to explain herself to our family and the kids. This mess was hers to deal with, not mine. The texts came in rapid succession. "Michael, please come back. I need to explain. I love you. Please come back." "Damn it, Michael. It's not what you think. I love you." But after 2 days of travel, her cold behavior, and now this betrayal, I had no interest in hearing her excuses. Furious, I finally replied with one text. "Forget you. I'm doing great with my job. My kids are thriving in college, and everything's paid for. I've still got enough youth left to start over, and I don't need you holding me back." After driving 4 hours of my 7-hour trip back to Louisville, I stopped at a diner for eggs and bacon. While eating, I decided to share my feelings with the world. Facebook was still the go-to platform back then, so I changed my relationship status from happily married to single and available. Then I uploaded 2 of the photos I'd taken at the wedding. In one, Abigail and Edward were locked in a passionate kiss. In the second, his hand was clearly on her chest. Below the photos, I captioned, "Abigail has decided to upgrade and reunite with her ex-husband." Meanwhile, I'm back on the dating scene. Life's funny that way. It might have been a little petty, but it was the truth. I was moving forward without her. The irony wasn't lost on me. Edward was nearly 50, balding, overweight, and honestly not much of an upgrade. It baffled me why she would throw away a 19-year marriage for someone who had already betrayed her. Maybe she preferred being with a doctor instead of an accountant. It hurt, more than I'd ever thought possible. I was heartbroken, angry, and yet somehow amused. Abigail was ending our marriage for a man who had cheated on her more than 20 years ago. Forget her. Forget him. They were made for each other. I'd always lived by the rule that respect and loyalty were non-negotiable. And I wasn't about to start tolerating disrespect now. Some might argue that it was just a kiss and some touching, not worth ending a marriage over. But to me, it's simple. Either my partner is committed to me, or she's free to be with someone else. We all make our choices. After finishing my late breakfast and taking a 2-hour nap in the car, I hit the road again, pulling into my driveway at 7 a.m. As soon as I turned on my phone, it exploded with notifications. Hundreds of messages from Abigail, her parents, her sister, and her friends. The sheer volume was overwhelming, and within minutes, Abigail herself began calling. I couldn't help but wonder if she'd spent the night with Edward or if she'd been up all night trying to figure out how to fix this. Either way, it didn't matter. I ignored her calls, my focus solely on getting what I needed from the house and moving on. Her family had always been kind to me, so when her dad, James, called that morning, I took his call. I laid it all out for him. James, I had no idea Abigail was unhappy in our marriage, but this was the breaking point. The disrespect she showed me in front of so many people is something I can't overlook. It's clear she still has feelings for Edward, and if that's what she wants, she can have him. I'll be moving out today and putting the house up for sale. Tomorrow, I'll contact a lawyer to start the divorce process. She can stay in the house until it sells, and I'll make sure the settlement is fair. Call me old-fashioned, but I can't stay with someone who doesn't want to be with me. She made her choice, though I don't think it was a wise one. James arrived at the house over an hour later, trying to convince me to wait and talk to Abigail before making any drastic decisions. But when he asked me to hear her out, I simply showed him the photos again. The images of Abigail and Edward openly fondling each other at the wedding were undeniable. James was clearly disappointed in both her actions and my swift decision to leave, but I couldn't bring myself to care. As I stepped into what used to be our home, a wave of emotion hit me. Tears welled up as I realized that this house, once filled with love and laughter, was now just an empty shell of a broken marriage. Over the past 5 years, Abigail and I had poured our hearts into transforming this place into our dream home. Back then, mortgage rates were under 2.99%, and the house had doubled in value. Being an accountant, I refinanced it at its full value, pulling out nearly $500,000 in equity. I set aside $200,000 in trust funds for Taylor and Sloane's college education, with a bit extra to help them start their adult lives. Another $100,000 went into upgrading the house, making it a place we both loved. Despite the higher loan amount, our monthly payment only increased by $700, an easy adjustment, especially with Abigail working as a receptionist to cover the difference. My salary was solid, and with my promotion to CFO, I was set to receive stock options as part of our retirement plan. Abigail had never shown much interest in our finances beyond her day-to-day needs, but that never bothered me. I enjoyed providing for her and our daughters, building a stable future for all of us. With the merger delayed, the stock options wouldn't factor into the divorce settlement. I planned to file for irreconcilable differences and split our remaining assets evenly. The house, heavily mortgaged, wouldn't leave much after the sale. Abigail, at 44, would leave with her car and about $25,000. If she had stayed faithful, she could have enjoyed a loving marriage and a secure future. But now, all I wanted was closure and for her to understand the gravity of what she had thrown away. Seeing Edward again after 2 decades brought back a flood of memories. Abigail had painted him as the man who betrayed her, someone who wasn't half as special to her as I was. And yet, here she was, letting him hold her, kiss her, and touch her, knowing full well it was wrong. She flirted with him openly, likely fueled by alcohol and resentment over my absence. She should have stopped, but she didn't. Maybe it felt good to rekindle an old flame, or maybe she convinced herself it was harmless. But the truth was, her actions spoke louder than any excuse. For me, this was the end. Respect and loyalty are non-negotiable in a relationship, and Abigail had failed on both counts. She made her choice, and now she'd have to live with it. As for me, I was ready to move forward, leaving her and her mistakes behind. She thought she deserved a little enjoyment. When Edward kissed her again, she felt a fleeting happiness. His kisses brought back memories of the old days, and as they danced in a secluded corner, she let herself believe that a bit of intimacy was harmless. Everyone else at the party was having a good time. After all, She told herself she'd make things right with me later. Then her phone buzzed. Assuming it was me checking in, she casually picked it up. The message made her freeze. I told her I was there, and she immediately realized she was in trouble. Panic set in. She couldn't see me at first, but guessed I was leaving. Desperate to explain herself, she made up an excuse to Edward about needing the restroom and hurried out of the wedding. Her heart raced as she reached the hallway, the sound of her heels echoing against the floor. The moment she saw me near the exit, she knew. I'd seen everything. She called out, begging me to stop, but I didn't even glance back. I got into my car and drove off, leaving her standing there. She tried to follow, but it was too late. As my car disappeared, she began frantically calling and texting, but I ignored every attempt. She was devastated, and she knew exactly why I wasn't responding. After sending message after message, she finally received a response from me. Forget you. Two of her friends found her outside in the cold, kneeling on the ground, trying to process what had just happened. They were both shocked by her behavior and deeply concerned about the future of our marriage. They knew me well enough to understand that this wasn't something I'd forgive easily. The next morning, back in Louisville, I sat at the kitchen table sipping one last cup of coffee in the house we had built together. A mix of sadness and anger welled up inside me. When I finished, I placed the empty cup in the sink and wrote a brief note for Abigail. In the note, I told her not to call me and that we'd talk once the divorce papers were ready. I didn't even bother signing it. Instead, I left my wedding ring on top of the note as my final statement. Before walking out for the last time, I opened my laptop, divided our funds, and canceled our joint credit card after clearing the balance. From that point on, she'd be on her own. If she contested the divorce, she'd have to manage all the bills without me. The house would sell quickly if priced right. It was in a desirable neighborhood. If she agreed to the divorce, we could settle things swiftly, and she could have her chance with Edward. I drove away from what was once my sanctuary and into a future I hadn't planned for. Later, I heard from friends at the wedding that Abigail was inconsolable after I left. She drank too much, cried uncontrollably, and eventually passed out from exhaustion. Her friends, feeling sorry for her, took her back to her hotel room and checked on her throughout the night. When she woke up the next morning, the weight of what she'd done came crashing down. She began calling me again, begging for forgiveness, leaving tearful voicemails, and sending message after message. But I wanted no part of it. Meanwhile, I continued packing up my life. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Seeing her with Edward, knowing she had allowed herself to be so careless, had left a deep scar. At her father's urging, she sought comfort from him. When he picked her up from the airport, she broke down, sobbing into his arms. "Daddy, I messed up," she cried. "I think Michael's left me." With a heavy heart, her dad tried to comfort her. "I spoke to him this morning, sweetheart, and it doesn't look good." "What were you thinking, Abigail?" "With Edward, of all people?" "I don't know, Dad," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I was drunk and mad at Michael for missing the wedding. I know I made a mistake, but I didn't even sleep with him. Can't Michael forgive me?" Her father sighed. "Abigail, from the pictures I saw, it might as well have been the same. To Michael, what you did is a betrayal. He's not the type to tolerate this." When Abigail got home, she clung to the hope that I might still be there. But deep down, she knew I was gone for good. She spent the day in tears, trying to call me, desperate to apologize. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had made the same mistake with Edward that her first husband had made with her. Now, she was the one left grappling with the consequences of betrayal, watching as her marriage unraveled. Michael, the man I truly loved, seemed to have vanished overnight. My heart sank when I saw his wedding ring left on the table next to a short, cold note. Meanwhile, Michael had relocated to the company condo reserved for visiting clients. Since it wasn't in use, he informed his CEO about the situation, and they approved to stay there. His boss, Bill, a good friend who had gone through a similar experience years ago, offered advice. He even suggested delaying the receipt of that year's stock options to gain better leverage in the divorce. The following day, Michael went to his office on the 16th floor, knowing full well that I wouldn't be able to get past security. He had already instructed the building's staff to politely escort me out if I tried to visit. true to their instructions. When I showed up on Monday, I was quickly turned away, realizing I couldn't reach him there either. With no way to see or speak to Michael, I was left feeling isolated, regretful, and terrified of what lay ahead. My daughters, Taylor and Sloan, called their father in a panic, urging him to talk to me. But Michael remained firm. "Your mother made her choice," he told them, his voice steady. To me, that choice was a betrayal of our trust. I need you both to understand that trust is sacred. When it's broken, there are consequences. Taylor and Sloan respected their father's decision, though they were heartbroken by what was happening. He reassured them that he would always be there for them, and he hoped they'd learn the importance of respect and loyalty in their own relationships. Michael's decision to post about the incident on Facebook brought unexpected consequences. Friends and family flooded him with calls, trying to understand what had happened. But the post also made Michael surprisingly popular with women. He began dating women younger than him, full of energy and enthusiasm, a sharp contrast to the negativity he'd endured in the final years of our marriage. Within a month of the post, he met Julia, who would later become his wife. They hit it off immediately and became a couple shortly after our divorce was finalized. When I found out about Michael's new life, jealousy and regret consumed me. I was angry at myself for the choices I'd made and bitter that he hadn't given me a second chance. But Michael refused to engage with me, communicating only through our lawyers. Eventually, we sold the house, splitting the modest proceeds after real estate fees. Michael let me keep the small remaining equity, about $11,000, and agreed to pay $2,000 a month in alimony for 2 years. Though it wasn't a large amount, it helped me get back on my feet. Meanwhile, I moved to Milwaukee, where I joined a support group and eventually began living with Dr. Edward Walker. Despite our history, life with Edward wasn't the same. I wasn't happy, and the guilt of what I'd thrown away weighed heavily on me. At our daughter's college graduation 3 years later, I saw Michael again. By then, he was married to Julia, a 28-year-old woman who was pregnant with their second child. Their 1-year-old daughter, Eva, sat in Julia's arms, radiating happiness. I, at 47, felt every bit my age and more. Seeing Michael with his beautiful young wife and new family was bittersweet. Edward stood awkwardly to the side, clearly sensing the tension. Later, I managed to speak with Michael alone. I apologized, pouring out my regret for the choices I'd made and the life we'd lost. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I risked everything we had for nothing." Michael's face was calm as he responded, "I've forgiven you, Abigail. I never imagined I'd find you in someone else's arms, but I'm thankful for the good years we shared and for our daughters. Your actions hurt me deeply, but they also led me to Julia and our new family. I've moved on, and I hope you can too." He wished me well and said he hoped we could remain amicable at family events. Just then, Julia joined us, holding Eva in her arms. Michael introduced us, and the contrast between us was stark. Julia, glowing with youth and happiness, was everything I used to be but had lost. In that moment, I realized that Michael had truly moved on, while I was left with the weight of my choices and the life I had given away. Abigail, now 47, could easily have been mistaken for Julia's mother. The stark contrast between them only deepened Abigail's regret. She couldn't help but reflect on the choices that had led her to lose the love of her life over a single night of anger and selfishness. Over the following decade, our paths crossed again at our daughters' weddings. Abigail remained unmarried, though she continued her life with Edward, who treated her kindly. But every time she saw me with Julia and our young daughter, it stirred up memories of the happy life we once shared. What was now just a distant memory for her was a life she could no longer reclaim, leaving her to live out her days filled with regret for the love and happiness she had let slip away. In an ironic twist of fate, that summer, after cashing in my stock options, I bought back our old family home when it came back on the market. The house, once a symbol of our shared dreams, was now a place where my new family and I could create fresh memories. Everyone, my daughter's friends, and Julia, was thrilled to see the house restored to our family. My daughters especially enjoyed visiting, reminiscing about their childhood and the love that had filled its walls. It's unfortunate that Abigail chose a different path. She would have cherished continuing the life we once envisioned together. But life moves forward, and I've found joy in building a new chapter with Julia and our daughters. This entire experience has been a reminder. Before you choose to wrong someone, be sure you'll never need them again. Abigail's story is a powerful reminder that choices have consequences, and some mistakes can never be undone. While she lives with regret, Michael has moved forward, building a happy new life with Julia and their family. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.